All right. All right. So good morning. I would like to welcome everyone here today, those who come on a regular basis and those who come when you can, and those who are here for the very first time. I would like to acknowledge the histories and wisdom of all of us at this meeting as we work towards making this a better world for our infants, toddlers, and preschoolers, for all of us. We strive in our perspectives, practices, and policy recommendations to challenge racism, sexism, and oppression in all its forms. We strive to create a safe meeting space to listen, learn, and speak so we can do better for our children. Again, welcome and thank you for sharing yourselves with all of us today. And I am Nancy Jost. I'm the co-chair for Prenatal to 3, and I also am the director of early childhood at West Central Initiative. Kati, do you want to go next?
Absolutely. Good morning, everybody. My name is Kathy Gomez. I do use they, them pronouns, and I am the policy associate with LaCroix Dillon Consulting here on behalf of Minnesota's Prenatal to 3 Coalition.
Thank you for being here. Nora.
Hi, thank you. I'm Nora Hall with Gray Hall. I'm a consultant. Happy to see everybody today. I am here because I'm working with Minnesota Integrated Care for Early Childhood Initiative, which we call MINIC, and also with Healthy Black Pregnancies, iChirp. So I think people have seen me before, so it's great to see everybody again.
Glad to have you here. Karen.
Hello, good morning. I'm Karen Gray, the other half of Gray Hall Consulting, and here usually for healthy Black pregnancies, but for today, we want to talk to you all about Integrated Care for Early Childhood Initiative. So, and welcome to Kansas.
Thanks, Karen. Glad to have you here. Matt.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Matt Herzog-Rundle. I am the Partner-Led Initiatives Coordinator in the Children and Youth with Special Health Needs section at the Minnesota Department of Health, and the state project lead for the Minnesota Integrated Care for Early Childhood Initiatives, along with Karen and Nora here. So good morning, everyone.
Thanks for being here. Betty.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Betty Cook, and I'm representing the Minnesota Association for Family and Early Education, MANAFI, and we do advocacy work for early childhood family education, ECFE, more commonly known as.
Thanks for being here. Roger.
Morning, everybody. My name is Roger Sheldon. I'm a retired neonatologist working with the Academy of Pediatrics and Doctors for Early Childhood. Big and interested in all of the things you talk about. So,
thanks for being here. Deb Fitzpatrick.
Hey, hi, everybody. Deb Fitzpatrick, Director of Policy and Research at Children's Defense Fund, Minnesota. We co-chair the coalition. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Deb. Lauren.
Hi, I'm Lauren Moberg. I work as the Infant and Early Childhood Director at the Minnesota Association for Children's Mental Health.
Thanks for being here. Joan.
Hi, Joan Bolfer. I'm retired from our local public health department, and I volunteer with Lorette.
For being here. Gayleen.
Good morning, Prenatal to 3. Gayleen Spolerich, Department of Human Services, Child Development Services as the Family Friend Neighbor Project Manager. And I'm excited to share some news about that with y'all today.
Thanks for being here. Courtney.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Courtney Jasper. I'm a lawyer lobbyist at Pohl Haas, and I'm really excited to be here with you all today to talk about the Minnesota Kids Code later.
Glad to have you here. Amanda.
Hello, good morning. Happy Friday. My name is Amanda Amos. This is my first meeting. I just started working at Minnesota Association of Children's Mental Health as the Assistant Director and Endorsement Coordinator in Early Childhood Department. So happy to be here.
Glad to have you here. Diane.
Morning, everyone. I'm the Executive Director of the Shelter and Arms Foundation.
Glad to have you here, Diane. Alyssa.
Hi, I'm Elisa Huss-Hage. I'm from Hope Toledo. So that is in Ohio, not Minnesota. And I'm here to just listen and learn as we continue to try to support all young children in our area, particularly in the prenatal 2-3 area. Thanks.
Welcome to Minnesota virtually. Frank.
Hey, good morning. Frank Forsberg, working with Little Moments Count and Before Racism. Good to see everyone.
Glad to have you here, Frank. Matali, is that how you say your name? Or okay.
Hi, everybody. My name is Vitali Jain, and I'm a lawyer supporting the coalition behind the Minnesota Kids Code. And we look forward to talking about it later. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for being here. Dale.
Good morning, Dale Dobrin. I'm a partner of Roger Sheldon and Mary Melland and Ada Alden and Doctors for Early Childhood. And as Roger said, we're interested in all things early childhood. Good to see you all.
Good to see you. Brenda.
Thank you. Visiting from Kansas. So nice to see the Ohio folks too. And I'm with the Kansas Breastfeeding Coalition, specifically our first 1,000 Days initiative. And we speak early childhood. We've been working with the early childhood field for about 10 years. So thank you for letting me sit in the back of the room virtually.
Well, thank you for being here virtually. Barb.
Bonjour and good morning. And yes, happy Friday. Barb Faber, CEO of Indigenous Visioning and President of All Nations Rise. And happy to be here.
Glad to have you here. I hope I'm going to pronounce your name right. Lisa?
Yep, you got it right, Nancy.
Oh, no. I will try to remember. I will remember.
Yeah. Happy Friday, everyone. My apologies for being off camera here. I'm Natalitha Colley, and I'm the Outreach Coordinator at the Children's Defense Fund, Minnesota.
Glad to have you here. Debbie.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Debbie Ziesmer. I am with the Minneapolis Youth Coordinating Board. I oversee all of our early childhood initiatives.
Glad to have you here. Brittany.
Good morning, everyone. Brittany Wright, Program Manager in the Governor's Children's Cabinet. Glad to be here.
This is Gayleen.
Thank you for being here.
This is Laura Beth from Prairie Care. Just wanted to give you a call. Is now an okay time?
Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah Contreras. I'm working for Ramsey County as an early childhood planner. Nice to be here.
Nice to have you here. And back to Laura.
We have a couple more. There's a second page here. We have.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't
That's okay.
see that we have a second page.
Do you want me to?
No,
go? Yep, you keep going then.
Okay.
It started Megan.
Megan.
Good morning, everybody. Megan Peterlins with Children's Minnesota. For those from out of state, that's one of our children's hospitals and health systems in Minnesota. Great to be here with all of you.
Glad to have you here. Norma.
Hi, everyone. I'm Norma, the Community Building Special Projects intern at Cluis. A couple of the projects I'm working on are focused on early childhood education within the Latina community. I'm glad to be here.
We are glad to have you. Fabiola.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Fabiola Martínez de Estrada. I'm for la Red Latina Educación de Educación Temprana in Minnesota and across all the state. I'm the subdirector. Nice to be here. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday to you and nice to have you. Ayana.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ayana Smith-Koyman, she, her pronouns, and I'm the legislative assistant for Senator Aaron May Quaid of Minnesota, who carried the age-appropriate design code in the Senate.
Thank you for being here. Now I think I have everyone, and back to Laura.
Great, thank you for those introductions. And I'm Laura LaCroix-DeLune, and I help coordinate the Prenatal to 3 Coalition. So we have a very full agenda. We have a few different presentations with time for question and answer. And then we have, we're starting to provide you some additional information on some of the implementation that's taking place based on legislative wins and administrative efforts to streamline that work. So we'll start with that. And then we have some Q&A for you in the end where we will, we want to hear from you, like which areas of implementation do you want to help lean into? Where do we want to spend our time supporting our state partners as they implement all the great wins that happened in this past legislative session. So that's kind of an overview. And we are going to start out with Matt Rundle and Nora Hall, and they are going to share with us information about the Minnesota Integrated Care for Early Childhood Initiative. And I will also put a link in the chat so you can take a look at their website. There's more information there. And Matt, if you want, you can go ahead with your slides then.
Right, great. Thank you, Laura. And thank you to the coalition for inviting us in to present today. Again, my name is Matt Herzog-Rundle, the Partner-Led Initiatives Coordinator at the Minnesota Department of Health within the Children and Youth with Special Health Needs section. And today we're here to talk about the Minnesota Integrated Care for Early Childhood Initiative, or MIN-IC as we typically refer to the project, because it is quite a lot of words for the name. You met Karen Gray and Nora Hall of Gray Hall, who are our community facilitators for the initiative, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that role means here too. But to get us started, I just wanted to paint a little bit of a picture here, just to let you all know that the MIN-IC initiative is funded by a grant from HRSA, from Health Resources and Services Administration. More specifically, the grant program is titled the Early Childhood Comprehensive Systems Grant. Minnesota is one of 20 states that received this grant. And the grant cycle is a 5-year grant cycle, started in August of 2021 and will run 5 years to July of 2026. So MIN-IC aims to be a community-led collective effort to engage families, professionals, and others to help build the infrastructure for an integrated model for early childhood screening, resource connection and referrals, and follow-up within healthcare settings, so that young African-American children ages 0 to 3 and their families are linked with the supports and resources that they need to ensure better childhood and lifelong outcomes. The 5 goals for the initiative that were originally put forth are shown here on the left, and they include community-driven leadership, advancing equity, having a common shared understanding and vision, innovative financial and policy change, and health system change focused on building the capacity and reducing bias. And a very important aspect of this project structure compared to other traditional sort of state project structures, and this was something that was very intentionally put into the design of the project, is that we structure the project in a way that the Community Advisory Council for the initiative, pictured in the center there, is the true center of the work and serves as the project's decision-making body. And the state and its contracted vendors work to support the advisory council. And we call that sort of layer, the outer layer that you see here, we call them the support team. So the advisory council is comprised of representatives from community-based organizations and healthcare systems that operate within African-American communities or have an African-American community focus, and also include, and the advisory council also includes African-American parents that are currently parenting young children as well, to have that lived experience side of things into the advisory council. So the state's role in this work is really as a sponsor of this work to handle the state and federal reporting that's required along the way, and also to work as a coordinator and connector to other work that's happening across the state that the project team would have an interest in other early childhood spaces. So Nora and Karen from Gray Hall work to facilitate the advisory council and have been responsible for recruiting members to the advisory council. They also facilitate the support team in meetings, and they also facilitate the support team in work that needs to be done to support the advisory council. And soon we're bringing on an evaluation vendor at this stage of the project as we finalize our strategic plan and begin to develop evaluation measures collaboratively with the advisory council to ensure that the initiative is meeting its goals and tracking those goals and measures over time. And this slide shows the project timeline for the initiatives and steps along the way. And I'll talk a little bit about some of these, what we've gone through so far, but starting with the project setup in, again, August of 2021, and then wrapping up in July of 2026 for the 5-year cycle. And so to talk a little bit more about kind of where we've been so far to set up the project, of course, grant funding was secured for the 5-year grant cycle. As a part of the project setup, the project aim was focused in on the African-American community specifically. And this was due to many reasons, but there were many other projects that were happening in early childhood spaces, particularly at the state level. None of those projects had a specific focus of a particular population. And given health outcomes and data that we consistently see, birth outcomes and other projects that have talked about centering equity, but haven't seen a huge, large impact yet, it was decided that the scope of the project would focus specifically on African-American children and families in Minnesota. And then during this project setup phase was also when the first advisory council meeting was held as well. And so then after we all convened together, we moved to the systems assessment phase. And in this phase, MDH contracted with Rainbow Research, which is a nonprofit research and evaluation organization based in Minneapolis. And Rainbow Research conducted interviews with advisory council members and others, including parents, providers, health professionals, early childhood professionals, and other community members to review how early childhood systems currently exist and truly hear the real experiences from folks that were interviewed about their interactions with early childhood systems to help identify gaps within those systems and then recommend ways to move forward and improve those systems. And so that system assessment was completed in May. And shortly thereafter, the advisory council met with the support team that included MDH state staff for an all-day strategic planning event within the community to come together and identify priorities to strategically plan around for the rest of the grant cycle through the initiative, and hopefully beyond too as well. And so that's where we're at today. We're closing in on finalizing the strategic plan and planning for implementation. And so with the strategic plan currently being finalized, I wanted to take the opportunity today to briefly touch upon some of the highlighted focus areas that came out of the strategic planning and the conversations that we've had with the advisory council over the length of the project so far. The goals of the project are on the left, and some of the focuses that came out of strategic planning are listed here on the right. And I just want to run through them briefly. First, it was clear that the advisory council saw an opportunity to highlight that storytelling about life experiences, specifically with interacting with early childhood systems, or more broadly in general, is a very healing practice. And then taking another step with those experiences and taking that lived experience to help others that are currently interacting with early childhood systems, as well as taking that lived experience and informing systems where opportunities exist to improve is also incredibly important. So there is a community togetherness and healing aspects of this point of storytelling and lived experience, and the advisory council sees the need to increase the involvement of folks with lived experience in early childhood systems themselves, and also create pathways for other folks with lived experience to share those experiences with systems to help improve the systems that families interact with. It's also clear that for any early childhood system to work well for everyone, there must be communication and partnership between early childhood systems. So we're doing a lot of intentional work to build collaborative partnerships across systems and working to break down silos between systems. Additionally, in discussions with the advisory council and in the findings of the systems assessment, it's clear that there are capacity issues within community organizations and within healthcare systems to meet the needs appropriately of the African American communities that they serve. And there are many organizations within the Black community that are doing incredibly impactful work. And how can the initiative work to improve the capacity of what's already working within communities? So really building upon the capacity of community strengths and assets that currently exist, and looking for other places to, fill those holes and improve systems too. So there was also a lot of discussion about building the infrastructure to hold systems accountable. So that would be building feedback loops, and creating opportunities for issues that are identified within early childhood systems to be identified, heard by members of that early childhood system at local and state levels, and then acted upon in good faith. So to make community priorities heard and to make those community priorities state and local priorities to ensure that identified issues are being taken seriously and then acted upon in good faith. And additionally, Minnesota is a pretty rich state when it comes to resources, not saying that there can't be improvement upon those early childhood resources, but it was clear that there is simply a disconnect in how existing resources are being attempted to be communicated to the communities that they are intended to be communicated to, and particularly within African American communities. So in many instances, the resources that folks are looking for do actually exist, but they simply do not know about them or how to access them. So there's a clear break in communication there. And that's something else that we are interested in and looking further into to try to figure out ways to improve the communication about things that currently exist that folks need to be able to connect folks to those resources. And so those are just a handful of the highlights from the strategic plan as we continue discussions with the advisory council to finalize that plan, but I wanted to bring them to you all today. And one opportunity that was identified ahead of the strategic planning event that we had in May, and this is some opportunities to move the initiative forward, and something that was also sort of written into the first sort of ideas of taking on the grant and creating the initiative, was to connect the initiative priorities as they develop to other systems level and community work. So that's more about developing those partnerships. So we're hoping to do more presentations like this one and find other spaces in which adjacent work is being done, not just within the early childhood system, but in other spaces that work in early childhood. We've already had some connections and partnerships developing at the systems level, and we're looking to make some more too. So I encourage you all to think about, the work that you're currently doing within your own sectors, to see if there's anything that, MinIC, Nora, Karen, and I, and the advisory council, would be interested in partnering in and working together, and we can make those connections. And even if it's just a simple connection, it's always great to hear about other work that's happening within these spaces to see how we can work together towards common goals, right? So we'd be happy to connect with you. And here's our contact information. I think this will go out in the slides probably after, but I'll also go ahead and add it to the chat once I bring this down to just so you have it. We'd be happy to connect with you. And Sarah Dunn is also on this list, and Sarah Dunn couldn't be here today, but she is the project director here at the state level. She's my direct supervisor in the Children, Youth, and Special Health Needs section. So also wanted to include her because she's a good contact to have too. So I think with that, that's the end of the presentation content, but we are happy to take some questions if we have time to do so, Laura.
We do. Thanks, Matt. I'll open it up to all of you, see what questions you might have. I have a few that I can lead with if you need a minute.
Are you doing any work in rural Minnesota?
So we are working to try to find connections in rural Minnesota, and we also understand that this is a very iterative process with a long sort of cycle. I know that Nora and Karen can speak to sort of the iterative process of continuing to invite folks into the advisory council, but that's also one thing that I think we are working harder to try to find. Being so like very Twin Cities based is sort of like the situation is right now, but we are looking to try to make those connections. Yeah, so that's a great question, Nancy. I appreciate that question.
We actually are, Nancy, we're always recruiting, looking for folks who want to be a part of the advisory council. So if you know some folks in rural Minnesota who might be interested, currently we're just meeting quarterly and we're doing things in between meetings. That would be a great opportunity to make those connections. So let us know, please. Yeah.
Thank you, Nora.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you can, I'm just going to raise a question and then give people a minute. Can you talk a little bit about how you're working with some of these other local partnerships? So you listed that as a goal. So I'm thinking about the Birth Equity Community Council that's run out of Ramsey County Public Health, and then the Birth Justice Coalition, which is working out of in partnership through Hennepin County. So there's a number of local initiatives that are focused on health system reform. Can you talk about how you're engaging with them?
We are starting to build partnerships. And so, and it just really has come out of our strategic planning work. Clearly, we want to be connected to both of those entities. Right now, you all probably know from earlier conversations that Sarah had here before she even submitted the proposal that they really looked at healthy Black pregnancies as a model for thinking about MNIC. And so we're already connected there. There are some people who are already on the advisory council. And so we are looking to make those birth justice connections. So you're right, Laura, that we should definitely be making those connections there. And I think the idea here is really not to reinvent anything, but really to try to connect to and fill gaps for the community of things that exist that could help them out, but they may not know about them or might not have sufficient information. So if we're going to create anything, it will be something that's an obvious gap to us that we think that needs to happen. Otherwise, all of the work really needs to be done in partnership with others. Yeah.
I'm going to make one more plug and then I'm going to turn it over to others. I'm also wondering if you have any connection with behavioral health over at DHS. They have just started an outreach project to better understand the maternal mental health needs of individuals. And it would be really important that we're hearing from African-American birthing people in that process. So that would be really helpful.
We have not made that connection, but we definitely will. Thank you for telling us about it. Yeah.
But Matt and Sarah, maybe you two can help make those connections. I think, and Brittany is on the meeting here too. So it'd be nice if we could loop people into all that work.
Yep, I'm happy to reach out and connect all of us.
Great, thank you, Brittany.
Thanks.
And I also see a question from Lauren in the chat about the Story Collective grant that's happening through the preschool development grant with MDE. That is something that's on our radar. We do have a good relationship with the preschool development grant in the initiative. The MDH representative of the preschool development grant sits on our advisory council. And so we do have some collaborative work that's happening there right now. And the Story Collective grant is something that is on our radar. So thank you for bringing it up, Lauren.
I would just add just a couple things. Since we just finished the strategic plan planning session, I think one important thing that came out was we were using sort of the term systems change. And the group was like, no, this is not systems change. This is systems disruption. We have had too many years of so-called systems change, and we need to do some things differently. So we're changing the language in the plan to be more relative to what the advisory council is advising. And the other thing I was just gonna say is another big piece for this particular group has been systems accountability. They really feel like there is nothing in place to hold these big institutions accountable for what they say they're going to do. And now we have that new, what is it? Now there's a new division that came out of the legislature. What is it? Youth children, youth, and families.
New department.
And what is that? And how,
Yeah.
you know, how, what is that? What is it going to look like? Who's going to be a part of that? Who thought that up? Who decided what was going to be included in that? And then how do Black folk, Black community access that easily, more easily than accessing, you know, these different departmental silos? So I just wanted to add that perspective of the work that we're doing. It's really serious work. It's kind of big picture stuff, but the folks we're working with really want to see some actual change happen within these systems. Thank you.
Does anyone else have questions?
This is Brittany. I don't have a question, but I did want to offer, I don't work in the new transition office or implementation office for the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, but I work with that team. And if this group has an appetite in learning more about the legislative process up until now and kind of how they're planning on building the agency over the next 2 years, I can also flag that for that team and see if maybe they can come and do a presentation.
That would be fabulous. Please do so.
No problem.
Thank you, Brittany. Okay, well, please continue to stay in touch with us as you build out your strategic plan and identify your target areas of work. It is timely for us to start our new process for the 2024 legislative session and identifying policy issues, even as we're trying to work with state agencies to implement what just happened. So it is very timely, and we welcome you to come back and bring those recommendations to the coalition.
Thank you, Laura. Thanks, everyone.
Yes, thank you. So we'll be sure to send out the slides, and this is being recorded because a number of people could not be here. So we'll share both the recording and the slides after today's meeting. So, okay. Well, we have another presentation, and Representative Kristen Bonner had reached out and wanted to share some of the work that she and Senator Erin May Quaid, who is with us. So thank you, Senator, for coming into the meeting. So we wanted to take a little bit of time to share the work of this age-appropriate design code for kids. And it's all about data privacy and protections. And I do not see Representative Bonner. So Senator, are you going to lead us off in this presentation, or is it Courtney who's going to lead us off?
That is a super great question. I didn't have a presentation plan, so maybe Courtney, you can speak to that, but I can speak to the bill and the reason and all of those things. Yeah. I just didn't prepare, I'm no preparer, so I would have come with a slideshow if I'd known. But go ahead, Courtney, you tell me what's the what.
Or is it me, Molly? Are you going to? I'm not sure. I didn't hear back from Kristen, so I just wanted to make sure we have a plan.
No problem. Well, we all took some time right at the beginning of the call to introduce ourselves, and I think we should give Senator May Quaid that opportunity as well. She is a fantastic member of the legislature, a really, really great leader. And so I would be remiss if we didn't have an opportunity to do that, and I can pull up a slideshow for you.
Oh, great. Hi, everybody. I'm Erin May Quaid. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a state senator from Senate District 56, which is Apple Valley, Rosemont, and a tiny portion of Eagan. I know at least one of my constituents is a part of this coalition. I always say I meet the most incredible people and that have incredible jobs. And they're like, oh, and I live in your district. So there's might be more of you in this room. I am the vice chair of the Education Policy Committee on the Education Finance Committee, Human Services Committee, and the state and local government and veterans committee. So my issue areas are really focused on education, E through 12, disability justice, racial justice. I'm with Claire Umuver-Baton and Zainab Mohammed, the first Black women elected to the Minnesota Senate. I'm the first Black mom ever elected to the Minnesota Senate. And so I always say, if you've heard me make this joke before, like if you know anything about Black moms and their kids, you don't mess with them. And I very much take like an all kids are kids. So like all kids are my kids right now. And that's why you'll see me fighting for them so hard at the legislature. I was really proud to author the legislation on behalf of this coalition for early learning scholarships, and will continue to do whatever work you ask me to do, because it sounds like you're working together. And this is the inside outside game, is to take the expertise, the time, the work that you all do and turn it into a movement inside the legislature as well. And I'm really happy to be with you today.
And Senator, you also signed on to the home visiting bill and the infant mental health bill. So you had your hands on a lot of different priorities that we share. So thank you for that.
And carry the paid family and medical leave bill across the finish line in the Senate.
Yes. Yeah. But it was a very low lift compared to what Senator Mann and the rest of the Family Medical Leave Committee did all year. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you for taking that time to introduce yourself and for joining us today. So, Courtney, you said you do have a presentation. Do you want to go ahead and share?
Sure. I'm hopeful that you all can see my screen.
We can.
We can.
Perfect. And we will do a abbreviated presentation for you all today, just to give you a little bit of background on the bill and on the great work that Senator May Quaid and Representative Bonner have been doing at the Minnesota legislature. I believe I also shared in the chat, there's a website, the Minnesota Kids Code, where you can get more information on the work that's being done on the bill itself and on some of our partners. I did hear that there's a representative from the Minnesota chapter of the Academy of American Pediatrics, and they have been a really great supporter and partner in this work. So wanted to say thank you for that. But the age appropriate design code is really a bill that is working to help protect children in the internet rather than protecting them from the internet. There's a lot of people that are very concerned about children's interaction with tech and with social media. The United States Surgeon General recently came out with information on this and a lot of concerns related to the extreme, inappropriate, and harmful content that can be found on social media, including content that can normalize self-harm, eating disorders, and other self-destructive behaviors. So this bill is really about working to fix the problem before it arises. So it's really focused on the design of these platforms and making sure that if they are really harmful platforms, that there are significant protections put in place to try to prevent children from being negatively affected. So that's really what the heart of the bill does. As you all know, notifications on your phone pop up on your front screen. They've got that red number so that you feel like you need to press it, you need to check it, because these companies make their money by making their products addictive. They can sell your information, sell your services. And so that's really what we're trying to target. Children are spending increasing amount of time online. By the time they're 18, it's about 70,000 data points that have been collected on them. These companies are able to estimate their users' age by about 6 months, studies say. So they know who's on their platforms, they know who they're creating their platforms for. And so being able to protect people in the platforms is really what is most important and what the goal of this legislation is. And so with that, I may toss it over to Mitali to give a little bit more background on exactly what the legislation does, and how they set up the harms and where it came from, being based on legislation that passed and is implemented and is the law elsewhere.
Thanks, Courtney. And I will be very brief because I'd love for Senator May Quaid to talk a little bit more about her passion for this bill and the way that she frames it, which is incredibly compelling. I think Courtney laid out the business model that this bill directly tries to address, which is really about profit maximization. And that is derived from trying to make sure that users are maximizing their time online, even as young as, toddlers. And I think that's important to say. A lot of what we hear about in the media is about teenage consumption of the internet. But these habits, these addictions are formed early on. I am also a mother of 2 kids who are 6 and 8, and I already see tendencies in them that are informed by just the very ubiquitous nature of digital consumption and use in our society. So it's really important, even for our youngest children, to try to address these business models and the fact that they're preying upon our youngest children. And so, again, I think it's really important to mention that this tech is not inevitable. These are intentional design choices that companies are making and that can be reversed. The choices can be made differently. And we work with a number of technologists who were formerly at Meta or Google, et cetera, who affirm this for us, that these are choices very much internally made at platforms to make the content more appealing, to make the algorithms more addictive, to put in features that allow kids, for example, to be connected to strange adult strangers, or to reward metrics based on the popularity of young users. Next slide. Okay. And so again, just to say, these are just some use cases of how our children are at risk with current design features, whether it's push notifications being sent by these company platforms to our kids, whether it's connecting them to strange adults so that they can buy, fentanyl and other kinds of things online, or to be at risk of sextortion, et cetera, whether it's putting on by default GPS so that people know where our children are located at any given point in time. And so what we have as a result of current choices is all of what you see here. We have downstream consequences of kids that are ending up with addictive behaviors, lowered self-esteem, eating disorders, body dysmorphia, et cetera. And so very practically speaking, this code would give children high privacy settings by default, as opposed to opting in to that. It would mitigate harms from features such as autoplay on YouTube, nudges, excessive notifications, and endless feeds, stop tracking children without real-time notice, and making kids' data accessible to others, making it easier for kids and their parents to understand what features are available online. It is capitalism over children, and this is what the bill is trying to address. Put kids before profit. It's a data minimization model of taking the least amount of data from our kids for the least amount of time and getting rid of it at the first opportunity, turning off GPS, stop using children's data to target them, requiring companies to perform an impact assessment so they know exactly how their platforms are impacting on users under 18. Putting in a standard that prioritizes children's best interests. And finally, making sure that children can be treated as children and not as adults. Next slide, please. And again, this code applies to all children under the age of 18. Current federal law only applies to children under the age of 13, and it's quite limited in terms of the protections. This also applies to all online services, not just social media, that are likely to be accessed by children. So this bill is not only intended for Sesame Street. Sesame Street is not the worst offender here. What we've seen is that children are where they are online is where platforms that have been designed for adults. So this intends to cover all services likely to be accessed by children. Next slide.
And I was going to say, I think for the for the benefit of time, we can probably end our PowerPoint here and kind of jump to discussion. I think that part of what's really important for a lot of people to know that is not particularly obvious for all of us is that the internet looks very different depending on where you live. So there are areas in the world where there are significantly more protections for kids because something like this has passed and it has worked. And so these companies know how to comply, but or know how to protect children online, but they're choosing not to for other reasons here. And with that, I think I probably should hand it over to Senator McQuaid. She's really passionate about this, just to talk about why she thinks this is a good model and why she decided to be the champion and the biggest advocate for this over at the Minnesota Senate.
Thank you. I mean, I think you saw the whole presentation. This is really well thought out. And as was said at the beginning, right, like there are different bills that we've seen across the country that try to protect kids from the internet. They ban them from using social media without parental consent, which is very easy for young people to get around, or just bans, social media apps altogether. The internet exists. Children are on the internet. We want to protect them in it. And I look at this as consumer protections that exist in the physical world that do not exist in the digital world. So I have a daughter, she's 15 months old. She has all sorts of toys. And there are all sorts of consumer protection laws that regulate the way that they make toys for her age group. But so for example, she can't have a toy that, through normal wear and tear, electric shocks her. But there is nothing that would prevent a tech company from creating an app whose algorithm pushes kids towards content that teaches them how to electric shock themselves. And so we really, we need as big of a coalition pushing for this bill, because big tech hates this bill. Even though, like Courtney said, right, there are the same companies that operate in Ireland. It's safer to, or in the UK, it's safer to be a child on the internet than it is in the United States. These companies operate in those countries, and yet they will pretend like they can't do anything about it. And so this gets upstream. This also is a future-facing bill. So because we're asking tech companies to build into the design of apps, tech, algorithms, all of those things, it would, for example, address things like AI technology as it advances. And so it's just a forward-looking bill. It's not saying what they have to produce and what kind of things they have to make. They just have to include best interests of the children at the design phase. I'm an elder millennial. I got social media when I was in college. I cannot imagine what my life would be like and what I would be like today if I had social media whose sole goal is to keep people on it, adults and children, for as long as possible, and what that would do to my brain. And after we had Frances Haugen, the whistleblower from Facebook, come forward and talk about the harms that they know they're causing to children, nothing changed at Facebook. They weren't required to change anything because none of these laws exist. So there is a fight ahead of us, and it is going to be parents and people who care about children against big tech and the money that they want to make off of children. And so I really hope that I can include this coalition in working with me on that fight. I really think that we can't really count on federal Congress. If you've seen any of these hearings where they're asking questions, like they have staffers who are younger than they are, and yet they still cannot ask questions that even remotely get to the issue. And so I think we're going to be looking at states to take action. And if you've ever accepted or rejected cookies at the bottom of a website when you're on the internet, that is because of one law that was passed in the state of California. So state legislatures have a very important role to play here. And I really want to make sure that as we continue to make Minnesota the best place to raise a family, that we are the leaders on the forefront of this issue. And the wonderful news is I have 34 votes in the Senate. They're not all DFLers, but I have 34 votes in the Senate for this bill. There are enough votes in the House for this bill, but it really is convincing some of the chairs of committees in the Senate in particular to give this bill a hearing, to get it to the floor. Even if they plan to vote against it, I have all the votes, but we can shore it up and make sure people are feeling really strong, because big tech deployed a lot of lobbyists this past session, and they're going to do it again this session. And I'll take questions about the bill, about the plan. Yeah, thank you so much for giving me time.
Yes, thank you. Questions from anybody? Will you, first and foremost, I have two then. If somebody can drop the bill number in for us, we tend to focus on our youngest children, but to your point, the tech companies are starting so early, and having those touch points even throughout their lifetime is the cumulative impact that we want to try to address. So I appreciate you bringing that forward and tying it back to our work here. And I will hold off on my question. I'm going to let Gayleen go next.
I have a question. How will this affect all of the technology that the schools are using? Because every child in this state owns an iPad and has access to many things that I feel are very unsafe, because I have 4 kids, and when they start coming home with the iPads, I'm like, great, now I have this battle to fight.
Yeah, that's a great question. So it would affect everything that would be on the iPad, every app, every feature, especially them actually, because those, likely to be accessed by children is the metric we're using. Well, if it's an app for school-age children, it's definitely going to be accessed by children. But I also think it's really important to just note that, the future that I'm thinking about is one where we don't have this one-to-one iPad world. If you look at the schools where, the tech millionaires and billionaires send their kids, they don't use devices in school. They're screen free. And so I think that we need to start approaching the way that we talk about tech in schools and what we're using tech in schools for. I know it bridges a really large gap for some people who do not have technology at home, and that's really important to acknowledge. But I think we're going to have to be looking at this entire issue systemically, not just what is on the apps and what the apps are and the features are, but really how is tech going to be integrated into our life. One thing I'm really thinking about is the metaverse. And right now it's really expensive to get, the goggles and all that stuff, but we have chemical restraints for people, for example, with dementia, right? They use chemical restraints. We could see a world where they're using digital restraints for children, putting them into the metaverse and having, supervision that way, because there's not enough adults or teachers, right? Like I do see this as both an equity issue, a disability justice issue, and just certainly a child protection issue. So that's how I'm thinking about that there. And it's bigger than age appropriate design code, but age appropriate design code is the best place to start to make sure that at least what they're accessing on those iPads is both age appropriate, safe, and they're not selling their data from it.
I appreciate that, Erin. And also, is there science that goes with that as far as what it does to the brain when you're spending your life in front of a screen?
Yes, both what it does to your eyes. So if you talk to optometrists, they're putting 30-year-olds in bifocals now because myopia is getting so bad. And we know what it does to the brain. So social media in particular is designed, when they made some of the scrolling features on Twitter, that was designed after the slot machines and the notifications. It's designed to give you the same kind of serotonin boost that gambling gives you. That's why likes and that's why all of those things are built in there, is because it's meant to addict you to it. And it's modeled after other things that are addictive, gambling being a really good example. And so there is science about what it does, and there is science. They used that science to design it.
Let's go to Deb, and then we'll take a look at the question in the chat too.
Yeah, you had mentioned earlier that a lot of the, kind of case for this has been made around teenagers, and that it does start very early. I'm just wondering if any place there's been some kind of a fact sheet or some kind of something focused on, early childhood, and whether that's something that we could use to share. And I think, again, to the brain development piece, right? Obviously, we know we're always pushing the idea, right, that 80% of brain development happens before age 3. So is there anything out there, either on your website or someplace else, or something that we could work on together to kind of, build the early childhood lens on this?
Yeah, I think, Courtney, can you answer that?
I was going to say, I don't know that I have that handy, but I'm sure that is something that we have and can get to you all. I now have Laura's email, and so I can get that information and share that with you all. Thank you, Deb. I think that's a a great thing
Yeah.
to pull together if we don't have it, but I know we have some of that information in different spaces. So happy to get that to you.
Just
Golly.
one additional thing to offer. I'm going to put in a link here. Senator McQuaid mentioned the whistleblower from Facebook, Frances Haugen. Some of the documents that she disclosed have now been disseminated to the public. They've been published. I'm going to put in a link here, and if you scroll down, you'll see a trove of documents related to kids and teens specifically. And you'll see, if you go on there, some internal documents that at Facebook where they're actually visualizing the frontal cortex of children and talking about brain development. So they know very well what they're doing in designing these products.
And I think, you know, even if we don't have something like that, I think that's something we could work on for you know, this early childhood development, because the science does exist and we have the research. I think one of the things I want to be really mindful of is, especially after the pandemic, like there are parents who use screens not because they're like, I love putting my kid in front of an iPad, it's my favorite, but like this is how our household stays like sane, right? This is how I couldn't cook a dinner. This is, you know, and so that is a thing that happens. And we can make sure that when a parent does do that, that what their child is utilizing is safe for them or safer for them too. So that's one thing I'll work with Courtney, because I've been talking a little bit about messaging. I think analogies are much more helpful because tech companies rely on our lack of understanding of just how well they can age estimate users and what they can and can't do on the back end. And so we've been looking at some analogies to kind of make this a little bit more understandable. Once people say tech, everyone's like, I don't know how the internet works, and they kind of tune out. So we are working on those things.
Perfect. Any last questions?
Which states are leading on this issue? That's a great question. California passed the age appropriate design code. It has been enjoined in a lawsuit. There's a lawsuit for it. And our bill is a little bit different than theirs because of the lawsuit. We exempt news media and journalism from the age appropriate design code for two reasons. One, I don't actually think that you can make the news safe for children. That's on us, not the news. They're reporting what's happening. And two, I believe that there's a large First Amendment concern that exists with having to have news organizations submit to the Attorney General really any information. And so I think it's one of the strongest claims in the California lawsuit, and I wanted to remove it. That's not to say that if we find out that, you know, news companies and news media are selling children's data, which I'm sure they are. I don't think they're the biggest, you know, bad actors in that place. If we find that there is a component that is harmful to children with data selling and usage, we can go back and try to narrowly address that. But I wanted to remove that piece so that if and when tech does sue, because this bill has been passed, we removed kind of their strongest claim. So California, and then I think it's been introduced in 4 other states, Courtney. Is that right? Like Vermont, Rhode Island?
Yes, it has also been introduced in Nevada, New Mexico, and Maryland. But some of those other states are looking at Minnesota and are watching Senator McQuaid and Representative Bonner really closely, because they are fighters and they have been working tirelessly and pushing and working sometimes with people that you wouldn't assume would be their best, you know, their natural partners on this issue. And so those other states that are trying to pass this right now are following Minnesota really closely, which is exciting.
I'll just name it. Courtney, you're being very polite. I think everybody knows that Senator Eric Lucero, and I do not share many values, but we are lockstep in this, and we are working very closely on this bill. And that's how important this bill is to me, is enduring many hours of Eric Lucero to get this bill done.
I'm curious if besides the compelling data you're probably presenting or collecting, if you're collecting stories, because, you know, my experience is that that's what convinces legislators to do something, when they have a story that kind of hits them, that might make them think about their own kids or their own grandkids. And so I'm just curious how much of that you're doing to try to make this happen.
Yeah, I would be happy to share. So we have a mother that has sent in a letter to committees that has shared her experience with her child online. We also had a college student, a young woman who testified a few times earlier in the session that shared her experience and made the case that I went through all of these horrible things. And, you know, my time online led me to an eating disorder, which I don't think I would have otherwise would have been a path I went down. I had these other horrible things happen, and I don't want my little sisters to deal with this. I don't want my little cousins to deal with this. And it was really powerful. And so that is a really great point, Joan. I think we're going to try, and I know Senator McQuaid has expressed interest in finding more young people to share those stories and to advocate for this. And so that's something that we're definitely going to be working on, trying to find more individuals who are willing to do that.
I'm going to try to set up a Google form for people to just submit their stories and you know, indicate if they'd be willing to have, you know, quotes be used or that kind of stuff. Just make it as easy as possible.
We have two more, if we can take these two questions quickly, and then I will follow up with you. There's a few networks that we think would be helpful to get this training, like our Family, Friend, and Neighbor Care networks. We'd like to get them this information. So, and then I want to make sure we have time for Gayleen to talk about the implementation of Family, Friend, and Neighbor Care minimally today. So Nancy and Roger, I'm just going to ask you to keep our timing in mind while you ask your questions, and then our responses.
So my question is there something as advocates we can be doing now? Should we wait till the legislative session starts? What kind of advocacy work should we be doing?
That's a great question. So I think, you know, one of the best pieces of something I would love to have in the toolbox is something that should be essentially the easiest, is a letter of support from this coalition to say, like, this is important to us. And then, you know, if you could mention it in a few meetings that you're in, particularly to, I can send you a list of senators that I think are movable on this issue. You know, I don't think they're like obstinate, but maybe need some education. You know, if there's one or two folks that maybe would testify one or two times in the hearing, I'm hoping to get, I don't want this to be a big lift for all of you. I think I'm imagining like I could help, you know, write it, and you just need to be there if you're already at the Capitol, or help draft the letter and, you know, make sure that everyone's okay with it. The other part is, you know, let us know what you all would need to kind of share out from your space, the spaces that you work in, to make this relevant, I should say. I mean, obviously it's relevant, but relevant for the spaces that you're in. The one pager on brain development at this age, I think, is a really helpful point. But if it's talking points, relating it back to one another, I think that would also be really helpful to know. I would love for you all to be part of this push, and I want to make that as easy as possible for all of you. Courtney, anything I missed?
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Yes, we'll work on getting you that information.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Roger.
One last quickie, I think it feeds very much into Nancy's question. We hear all the time that the companies are actually asking to be regulated. I suspect that that's bogus, since they've unleashed apparently an army of lobbyists upon you. What are the arguments, other than keep your hands out of my business, that are coming forward that we could help refute?
Yeah, so I'll just differentiate. So the AI companies are asking to be regulated, which I think should make us all absolutely terrified that they created a thing and then feel like they want that never happens. And part of the reason the initial AI companies are asking to be regulated is because pretty much every big tech company now is doing AI, and they kind of realize that they, you know, released this model for people to really pull off of, and now every company's doing it and there is no regulation. So that's why they're asking to be regulated, the original AI producers, not all of them. The biggest arguments that we hear coming from tech companies is that this is a content moderation bill, that, you know, that we want to censor what's happening on their sites and their apps. That's not true. The second is we couldn't possibly know what the ages of the people are on our website or on our apps, as if they don't already know. We know that they can estimate within 6 months. It's highly accurate. they say that they'll have to be age verification. What else, Courtney? What's the other big ones?
The kids are gonna get kicked off the internet.
Oh, yes,
That
yes.
one's tough to hear.
Yes.
Yes, yeah, the kids are all, they're not gonna be able to use TikTok anymore because they're gonna have to show driver's license and they
Right.
don't have that. Again, that's not how this works.
One that we often hear from folks is this is kind of based on the political landscape that you heard about. This is parental responsibility. This shouldn't be about, changing anything for the kids. We should expect parents to do this, which I think this coalition is very well placed to refute.
Yes, I think that's one of the biggest myths that surrounds this, is that we have put this as an individual responsibility onto parents, and not as an actual problem that exists systemically within tech, who are responsible for this, that there is no way for a parent to say, oh, don't, like, this thing that is meant to addict you is doing that. It's my job to somehow undo the brain chemical changes that this company is trying to institute in you. So moving off of that, like, it's the parent's responsibility to regulate the time. It's not about the time. The whole point of it is to dominate the time, right? That's the point of the tech. So moving this out of the individual responsibility, parent responsibility, to actually it's governmental regulation responsibility, it's consumer protection and child protection responsibility.
Great. Well, I know I am not the only one who's grateful that you made time to join us today to share this work. We will continue to find ways to help promote this, and we welcome you to come to these meetings also at any point in time. We meet second Friday of the month, and always at this time, always at this Zoom link. So please feel free to join us. I will commit to sharing out the recording here and the slides, and then once we get those talking points for the connection to the brain development or a fact sheet, we'll be sure to share that as well. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. All right, Gayleen, the next section of the agenda, we are running behind, is to talk about implementation around some of the legislative wins. And then we had a poll that we were going to distribute during the meeting to better understand what areas of implementation that you want to focus on and work on with us, and then start the policy discussion for next year. What I will do is I will send out a link to the survey. Instead, I'll shift it from a poll to a survey, so that we can collect that information and have that for our next meeting in September, so that we have enough time to hear from Gayleen Spolerich, who is the lead staff for Family Friend and Neighbor Care at the Minnesota Department of Human Services. And she is going to share with us an update on where they are in the process of implementing the new policy and funding. So congrats again, Gayleen, and thank you for joining us.
Yes, and thank you for allowing me to share the updates, because folks, we've made history, and I am so proud of the grantees and the advocates that worked really hard to prove that this work is worth funding. So I'll make it quick. I'm also going to want to share my map and our logo, because we were fortunate enough to be able to create all of that. And with this work moving forward, we get to grow that out. So the 2023 legislative session ended with the passage of the Family Friend and Neighbor Child Care Grant Program. With the advocacy, emails, phone calls, and testimonies, the FFN grant program has been permanently established and will be funded at $3 million a year in fiscal year 25, which begins July 1st of 24, and $2.5 million each year after that. The state of Minnesota has acknowledged the positive work of FFN providers and networks and believes these grants add value to families and communities across the state. FFN grants will be available for providers and networks to offer care and education in a way that celebrates culture and empowers children to learn and grow in a safe, stable learning environment. So thank you, grantees, because they've worked hard and it shows. So with that funding, there's a gap. There's going to be a gap before the legislative funds fall into place. But we were fortunate enough to be supported with the CCDF funding to fill the gap to carry the work into fiscal year 25. So from 10/1 to June 30th, the CCDF funds will cover those grantees. And we were also fortunate enough to get our RFP out immediately as soon as session ended, because I was like a mother hen sitting on an egg, just waiting for everybody to just say, move it. So the FFN RFP was published on May 25th. The proposals were all submitted and due by June 30th. We have selected the proposals. We did that on July 28th, and we received 25 proposals. And our goal currently is to get those contracts fully executed by 10/1 for the funding to continue to help the work. So more to come on that. I can't talk anymore about that, so I'll leave it at that. But we do have some upcoming reports that I wanted to share with you. We have an environmental scan report, and that will include a policy brief that we're currently working on. So between September 22 and June of 23, we had an evaluation firm contractor, and they designed and implemented an environmental scan of FFN childcare. They used 2 surveys, one for caregivers and one for the families who use FFN care. They described their FFN arrangements, who's involved, the motivations that draw people to FFN care, and how the state can best support them. Findings in this report only apply to the 883 survey respondents, but the results from the study emphasize that there is no typical FFN provider, family, or arrangement. In fact, customization is exactly why families choose FFN, because formal childcare systems don't meet their families' childcare needs and preferences. So we'll be able to share that in September. We also have a sustainability contractor that's doing research on how to sustain our funding for FFN. So they've been interviewing and hosting discussions from national and local models. And this will include a summary of specific questions gathered from the FFN grantees. This report too will be shared in September. And our third contractor that we're working with is the human-centered design. We're focusing on how human-centered design can impact the way the teams work together and to help match our FFN caregivers' unmet needs to program design to increase engagement, improve outcomes. And this too will be shared in September. And if I have another 30 seconds, I would really like to share this. Can you all see what I'm sharing?
We can.
So here is where we're covering. The colored areas of that map is where our current grantees are. There are 18 grantees across the state. It's our hope with this next round of proposals that we're able to cover the map more. And then I also wanted to share that lovely logo that you'll see more of moving forward. So that is my summary. History's been made, and I'm looking really forward to working with more folks on this work. Now I need to unshare. Give me a second.
That was
so that we
great.
can move on.
No, that was
Thank
perfect.
you, everyone, for all of your hard work. It paid off.
Yes, very exciting. Let's open it up to see questions for Kayleen.
I have a quick question. The agencies that received grants, are they going to be granted into the future, or is there a new round coming up?
All of the current grantees, if they were interested in continuing their work, had to submit a proposal.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions for Gayleen? Go ahead, Roger. You're muted.
Yeah, I'm slow. My question has to do with recruiting additional providers. Is there any communication into the community? Is there any incentive out there for adding centers, adding folks?
Well, and that's the work that the grantees that will receive the funding, the work that they do is to recruit and build the networks of FFNs within their communities.
So it's the main focus then, great.
Yes.
All right. Any other questions?
I have a question. Do you all have any data on how BIPOC communities are involved in FFN, like some data that actually shows that? Can you share that with us?
We are currently working on that data, Nora, because the data that we have is from the late 2000s. And that's why we really worked hard at starting to collect data at some point here. And just so you know, and I didn't do a very good job of sharing this, all of the agencies that currently have grants work with people of color, every agency across the board, all 18 grantees. And that's our focus, is to continue to support all of those agencies that work directly with people of color.
We'll follow up with some questions. Thank you.
There is also the email came out, and I think I can put it back in the chat. Oh, I did. The Minnesota FFN website. I called it the legislature by accident. So I put that in the chat. They have a plethora of resources there, some really great resources and some storytelling. So take a look there as well, because it's amazing the amount of work that you've been able to do, Gayleen, you and your team at DHS, working side by side with the networks. And they continue to identify policy issues that the state needs to help lean into to help make quality care accessible to all children, regardless of who's their care provider. We just appreciate that the networks are focusing both on quality care as well as identifying gaps.
And thanks for sharing that link, Laura, because there's some great videos on there that are the people that are doing the work currently.
Okay, well, thank you. I just really want to say, Gayleen really was ready to get that RFP out and anxious because she had to wait for the legislature to finish their work and before she could send that RFP out. But if you recall, like literally within days of the session ending, it was out so that she could keep the federal resources flowing until state resources were available. So I really appreciate you and your team, all the work that you've done to keep this in front of the agency. You're a small little program within a very, very, very large agency. So to keep this in front of people, keep this a priority for implementation, says a lot about you and the work that you're doing. So I just really want to call that out.
I appreciate that, Laura. And just so you know, I don't think I've ever seen the state work as fast as this on this project, because I'm like, it's new work and we are going to move this. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. Okay, well, we had some great presentations, learned a lot of great new information today. I wanted to make sure we had time for those conversations. I always think we have more time on the agenda than we do. So as I said, I will actually follow up with changing my poll into a survey, send that out to you. But I'm wondering if there's any updates from our co-chairs that you would like to share in relation to any of this work or what we have on the agenda, or any of you have announcements that you want to share as well.
I would like to just say that the child tax credit passed, which is awesome. But one of the things that we did not get done, we got permissive language included to get that tax credit to families in advance and on a monthly basis. So this was one of the lessons we learned from the federal CTC, how important that was, how many families were relying on those tax credit dollars to cover basic expenses like food and rent and all the things that come every month, not once a year. So the Department of Revenue is very, very interested in moving that this legislative session coming up to implement that. But we are really wanting to center, there's a lot of mechanics around it, and there were a lot of problems with the way the federal government did it. And so we really are interested in centering and pushing forward quickly some conversations with families in different communities. So just wanted to put that out there, and maybe in the follow-up email, we can see if there are any organizations here that would be willing to share some questions or think about ways that we can connect with families in short order. The department is moving full speed ahead on this, and we're kind of trying to put the brakes on it a little bit because there's actually a lot of devil in the details in this, and we really, really want to make sure that however this is done, it doesn't harm families. Anyway, just wanted to put that out there. We'll be in touch. I know we don't have a lot of time, but I wanted to let folks know about that. And then when we get to sending out the implementation survey, there is a lot of work even without the periodic payments to get to new families that are going to be eligible for this child tax credit that don't normally file taxes. So ITINs filers, any family with no earned income, their child is eligible for this tax credit. And we work very hard to do that, to make sure that those lowest resourced families and children had access to the full value. So we're going to have a lot of work to do to make sure we're reaching those families to let them know that they're eligible. So anyway, we'll be in contact on that.
And I'm wondering if we might want to spend time specifically next month sharing a deeper dive with people on this issue, because I do think, Nancy, you're already identifying like, well, we could go to Head Start families, or we could, FFN would be another great way. The networks would be another great way for us to reach out to families. So I'll work with you to get the information. So we'll send out the slides and the recording on Monday or Tuesday at the latest, so that we have that information out there. All right. Okay, I just then maybe we could, Nancy, do you want to just do the quick reminders on the agenda, and then we can wrap up for the day?
Laura, I am really sorry, but I don't have the agenda.
Oh, no worries. I can do that for you. Yes. We just wanted to remind you that the National 0 to 3 conference is here in town. They are going to be hosting the conference at the Convention Center in Minneapolis, September 19th and 20th. So it's a great opportunity to meet colleagues across the country. And I think a few of us are planning to go as well. I will include the registration information so that you have access to that when I send out the recording next week. And then again, another reminder that it is time for families to renew their coverage with Medicaid, and we don't want families to lose fall into the gap by not responding, to lose their coverage if they don't respond and provide an update on where they're living. So I put in the chat again, and I'll add that to the information we send out next week. This is just going to be an every month, whoever the month that you signed up for Medicaid initially. And for some families, it was 3 years ago at the start of the pandemic. So they probably don't remember exactly what month it was. But monthly renewals information is going out. And people have moved by then. So I just want to make sure that we are getting the word out to the families that we work with or within our networks. I do know that Park Nicollet has created like information that they're handing to families when they go to their pediatric visits. So we're just trying to get the word through as many safe partners as possible. This might be something, you know, for Nora, for you and Karen to bring back to your team so that we're not losing coverage. Because again, in addition to the renewal, it's a 12-month eligibility now. And beginning 2024, it'll be a continuous coverage. So 2025, actually, 2025. Roger, yeah, go ahead.
Was the headline yesterday of 30,000 folks losing coverage, was that an estimate for the rest of the year, or was that a monthly number?
I have, which article? I did not see the article. Where was it?
Front page headline, Star Trib.
Then it was an annual estimate.
Good. Scared me that they all dropped off yesterday.
Yeah, we're worried about how many people will be losing coverage if they don't realize. So this is a link that they can just go in and update their address. So trying to make it as easy as possible for people.
Yeah.
Okay. And it looks like Galen had just put in the chat. They will have an FFN presentation at the 0 to 3 conference. So if you go, you can support your friends and colleagues here in Minnesota too. So, and I believe Lauren, if Lauren is off, I know Makma is also doing a presentation. So, all right. Well, thank you everybody so much. We really appreciate having you here and for all your great work. And we will see you in September, but we'll be in communication between now and then.